Welcome to our video series on the ASV scanning and attestation process. In this video, we will cover the process for creating a PCI scan for the external cardholder data environment and viewing scan results. This process applies to customers and our ASVs that use a Sync product that includes the workflows and reporting capabilities required for the attestation of scan compliance process. So setting up a job, the first time you log in, you should see a quick hyperlink that asks you if you'd like to create a job. You can also create a job at any time with the the plus button to show creating different objects such as a job or reports, or the PCI identity that you'll be required to complete to create your reports. So creating a job in Sync uses a wizard-driven process that gives you a few different steps. First, we'll give the job a name. In this case, it'll be our PCI ASV scan. We can give it a description if you'd like, if you're doing different other types of scans, or at least different intervals to be able to differentiate one for the other, describe what you're doing. If you have the specific roles for the PCI, for an typical ASV customer, you should see the PCI external policy enabled by default for your login. And this policy is already pre-configured to run the scans and assess your results against the ASV program. So in this case, all we're required to do is put in the job name. And next, to put a target in. You'll notice at the top it says local node. That's Sync nomenclature for the scanning engine that you're using. Your ASV will already configure your account to use whatever scanning engine that you need to be able to assess the targets that you're scanning. So in this case, we can put in different target selections, such as by host name or IP address or URL. In this case, we'll put in the IP address since we know specifically what targets that we want to scan by their IP address. And you'll notice the scan engine says the scan active status is available. So once we put the targets in, that's all that's required for this step. The last step is scheduling the scan. For most, you may want to scan immediately to get some initial scan results to see where you're at in terms of compliance and see if there's any issues to address. You can also scan at a scheduled time. So maybe you want to scan it now to take a look at what your initial observations are as far as your status, but maybe you want to run a scan for maybe later this weekend or later at night. So we'll run this scan again, and we'll do our scan later for this evening. I'll say 7 o'clock in the evening, and we'll save that scan. So now we have scans set up to run immediately and then scan one for later this evening. And you can also set up a scheduled scan, a recurring scan. For PCI, the ASV program is established to do a scan typically every 3 months, quarterly basis. So once you've got your program established, you might want to scan, say, every 3 months, and then you select which day or which particular calendar date you like to set and what scan window or scan time you want to start your scans. In this case, we've already established 7 o'clock in the evening as our normal scheduled scan. And at the bottom, we'll put when the schedule ends. We're running these every quarter, and for now, maybe we only want to run those 4 times and see how these things end. So it'll schedule each quarter as your scheduled scan, and at the end of a calendar year, after 4 occurrences, it'll stop. But you don't have to set anything. You can say never. So in this instance, we schedule a scan to run now. We schedule it to run later in the evening after we've had a chance to look at our initial results, and a recurring schedule to run every quarter. So once the scan is started, you'll notice it shows up in the Scan tab under your scan page. And a scan page allows you to take a look at the scans that you've run by individual jobs, or each scan that you've run for those jobs. The scan tree is just another way to be able to differentiate. So if you run a multiple scans for a particular job, this is just a tree view that lets you break these out. The most typical is just to look at things under the Scan tab. Now, one thing I will say is you can use the column picker to display what type of columns you want to see. So in this case, maybe we want to put our name down as the person who started the scan, the number of targets that we're scanning, and the PCI status, as well as what's category. And once we've moved these columns over to the left, now we can display what order that we want these in. Maybe we want to scan policy at the top, and maybe the scan category above that. And so our column order will be scan category and policy, the job names, when it starts and ends, some target information, who the owner of the job is, which would be ourselves. And we want to put the progress at the end and maybe the status right beside that. Just another way to move things around, to order things that are most visually easy for you to understand what the scan is. So that's the steps to set up your first scan job. And we'll let that scan complete, and we can always look at the scan status here in terms of progress bar, as well as the status running here. And typically for a target, if it's a fairly small target, it will take a bit of time since it's scanning every port as required by PCI, which is over 52,000 ports it has to scan for each target. So we'll come back later and look at the progress of the status of this scan and see where we're at, and then we'll take a look at the scan results. So in the interest of time, we've moved forward. As you can see, our scan is completed. Progress is 100%. And the PCI column, unfortunately, shows that the scan would fail compliance. So the best way to look at the results is we'll go over to our All Results option under Analyze. And you can, if you have more than one scan, you can select the scans from the Data Filters option, and it'll show what jobs you have running and what scans that you've completed for that job. In our case, this is our first scan. So we'll select this and review the results. In this case, we have two results. One has failed, and one was just informational of lesser importance. So that scan would have passed with the exception of that result. So a couple of things to cover under the information. First of all, we can look at the details in a long list of a lot of different information, such as the severity scores and class and this tutorial information. But one of the most often used is the full tutorial that gives you the guidance on that vulnerability. It'll tell you the impact and the background, a lot of technical details, but one of the key issues is how to resolve the issue. In this case, we need to upgrade our open SSH version, and just upgrading of that would pass compliance. Now, there are instances where the information may give you indicators that the scan didn't find something accurately. Maybe something is configured differently on that host, and the result may not necessarily be pure evidence of the vulnerability's existence. In that case, there are cases where you can dispute an incident. We don't want to cover disputes in this workflow, but I did want to give you information that shows you go through your scan results and you do see a case. The most often used scenario is just to resolve the issue and then rerun a scan until you see your scan's compliances pass. But if there is an issue that you'd like to cover with the ASV and you have evidence that this result may be an error, then we can work through the dispute process to gather that evidence and submit to the ASV. So in this case, that completes the scan process, the review of the information, and we'll cover the dispute process in the next video.